Context of white supremacy. Gus T Renegade in for another program, hopefully constructive information. Second program today for Sunday, June 20th, 2010. I want to get started so we can get as much information as possible. I'm real pleased about this broadcast. But before we hop into this program, I did want to take a quick second to thank the many folks who have contributed to the broadcast and Gus T Renegade getting a MacBook Pro. A lot of this was started with Mr. Sin Q and another listener who called in who asked why the program was shutting down August 5th, and that dialogue prompted a flurry of activity and investments in the program, and I had been leery about saying people's names on the broadcast, but I did want to acknowledge my appreciation for everyone who has contributed. So I said I can, what I'll do is I won't say the full name, right? I'll just do a last name, and then from now on, anybody who contributes, you can let me know whether or not you want your name said on the program or not. And if you don't, then I'll just shoot your email or whatever and say thanks privately. But these are all folks who have contributed since Thursday, June 16th, 2010. Dr. Khalif Muhammad, who was on the program earlier today and who will be back, program number 2 on Tuesday of this week. He contributed almost immediately when the program ended on June 16th. Mr. Span, Miss Jones, can't tell. The name is throwing me, so I'll say Mr. or Miss Swan. Khadijah has just been an all-star listener and supporter. Miss Wynn, today's guest, Mrs. Che Abram. It's another one that's throwing me. I'm not sure. I'm going to say Mr. Samuel, the Travel Lyrics Company, LLC, and Love, Truth, Liberation, all contributed just since the June 16th program. Thanks, everyone who has invested. I hope the program has been worthy of your generosity, and yeah, hopefully I'll get the MacBook Pro so we can continue with the broadcast. I want to hop into the discussion today. I did want to share, because I was speaking with our guest for today's program, I was speaking with her on Thursday, and she said, yeah, make sure you do more programs with the Boondocks. And if this program, today's program, had aired a little bit later, I would have had a lot to say about the Boondocks today. I don't know if folks have heard the previous programs that I have done talking about the Boondocks, but the two shows specifically that focused entirely on the Boondocks, the homosexual content of that program was touched on quite a little bit. I'm going to do a third program about the Boondocks just because, and I haven't seen tonight's episode yet. I haven't even seen it. But this is the title. I'll read that and then we'll get cracking on this program, which I am looking forward to. Tonight's program, the title of that episode is Pause. I'm just reading the title that's posted on Wikipedia. Granddad is cast as the leading man by mega superstar of stage and screen, Winston Jerome. But when the theater group turns out to be a homoerotic evangelical cult, it's up to Huey and Riley to put a pause to it. That's tonight's episode, okay? And I've seen previews. It's pretty much what they described. This is next Sunday's episode, so as long as I have the ability, we'll do a show next Sunday. This will be number 3 on the Boondocks. Next week is A Date with the Booty Warrior. That's the name of the episode. Description: having conquered his fear of prison rape, Tom volunteers to lead Huey, Riley, and some classmates on a trip to jail as a part of a Scared Stiff program. But when a riot breaks out, Tom has to get the kids and his delicate backside out of jail in one piece. I'll just leave that there. Boondocks, we'll do number 3 next week. Yeah. this program. I just spoke with our guest for today's program. I just spoke with her just a couple days ago. She was, or I guess has been listening to the broadcast, and she contacted me just to exchange views about racism, white supremacy. We shot a couple messages online and ended up having a discussion this past Thursday about racism, white supremacy, and we talked, I think, for about 2 hours, and I said, wow, this probably could have been a fantastic broadcast, and I asked her if she would be interested in coming on the program. She said sure, and I think this will be very constructive. She just flew back into California today, and I am real pleased to have her on the broadcast, Mrs. Che Abram. Mrs. Abram, are you with us?
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Outstanding. I guess for folks, since you're not Tim Wise, internationally renowned for your work against racism, white supremacy, would you like to tell the listeners anything about yourself, work that you do?
I am a non-white female. I'm black, and I live in the Bay Area, and I work in at a college and university in the Bay Area as an admission counselor.
Right on, right on. Okay. I want to hop right to it because I think listeners will really appreciate this broadcast. Begin every show. Context of white supremacy. I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy, and the definition that I use for both terms is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that definition is accurate?
I do believe a system that exists, and I believe that is a very accurate definition.
Groovy. You shared some information about, or you shared some details about things you wanted to cover specifically with NCOREr and your experience with the legendary Tim Wise, and some your personal development with racism, white supremacy. What I would like to do, I want to roadmap this one. So this will sync nicely with the earlier program that we did today, because that program ended with how racism, white supremacy corrodes relationships between non-white people. So if we can go inside out with this program with you and how your understanding of racism, white supremacy has evolved, how it's impacted your relationships, how your understanding has changed the way you view Tim Wise and your experience with the conference. Is that acceptable if we go that route with the program?
Yes.
Outstanding. Okay. Would you like to, do you want to share how you began to become informed about racism, white supremacy?
At my university, at a lot of universities across the country, there's this diversity work that we all do. And when I was hired there a couple of years ago, I was kind of pegged as a person to be into the diversity piece. So over the last few years, the school was taking it a lot more seriously, and it's kind of come down from the board that this needs to be taken care of. So it initially started with me just kind of being aware of it, them putting out a plan, and them going, okay, you need to go to this conference. And from the conference piece of it, I came back and then was talking with a friend of mine about the conference and mentioned actually one of the speakers at the conference, and he then told me, oh, he's on this show on the radio. Oh. And from there, I started listening to the show and then bought Neely Fuller Jr.'s book and then Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's book. I'm still reading them very slowly. And that's kind of essentially how I kind of got into all of it. And I must say, and probably the last 6 months or so, Neely Fuller Jr.'s book, because that's the only one I've read so far, is right on point for me, in my opinion. And it's kind of helped me, and it's opened my eyes to a lot in terms of work. And I've listened to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing on the show and on YouTube and a few other things. My friend has sent me some clips. And when listening to just a few things I've heard about her, a lot of things just kind of started to ring true from my personal life and then, of course, at work and henceforth.
Can you think of some specific things that have changed with regards to your thought, speech, and action once you became informed about, I guess, counter-racist logic and Mr. Fuller's work, Dr. Welsing's work?
Once I became aware of it, so one of the biggest things I've done is I actually probably the most common thing other people hear me say is I constantly refer to all quote-unquote people of color as non-white now. That's my term that I choose to use. It makes the most sense. So I say white people and non-white people is my biggest one that I use. And then in terms of looking at things when it comes to students that I work with on a day in and day out basis and what happens with them when they come and tell me stories, or when something happens with my husband or my son. Like my son specifically, he's 4, and we were at a park in the area, and there was a 10-year-old white girl. They were the only 2 children at the park, and the girl's mother was white, and she pulled her daughter and yelled at her daughter to not play with my 4-year-old son. And, probably more than 6 months ago, I would have looked at that going, oh, she's just ready to go. That's no big deal. And, now today, no, I know what that is and I know why. Basically, your daughter at some point is going to be very interested in my son and want to date him at some point, and that'll taint your whole little line of life and potentially ruin your family. So, it was for me with him at 4, that was a really hard thing because he's 4 and he didn't understand why a child didn't want to play with him. And I got it and I understood it, and, I just packed up and took us away. So that's one of those experiences. My other experience is kind of realizing, so for probably the past 6 years, I have a son and I have a stepdaughter, and they're 5 days apart. So I don't need to go into the whole story, but they're 5 days apart. And that whole process for me was a very confusing and stressful time of what do I do. And through that whole process, I was watching, because I was home on maternity leave, so I'm watching Dr. Phil, and I'm watching Oprah and all these shows, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. My mom's a therapist, so I'm talking to her. What am I supposed to do? And, society tells you you're supposed to walk away, you're supposed to leave. And, it's 6 years later, so obviously I haven't left. But I looked at it, and in most recent times, something for me, my husband is black, and he is a dark black man. In most recent times, I've looked at it going, I know it seems really stupid that I stayed, but for some reason I just felt compelled to stay. And in talking to my friend who turned me on to the show, he was like, if you don't have our backs, who does? Which is a very important piece for me, because for me it I took away probably the very personal, emotional side of it and looked at it and started reading and going, this makes a lot of sense. If black men don't have our backs, if I don't have their backs, then who does? Who does he have that's going to have his back? And then looking at it, I kind of made the analysis probably a month or so ago, talking to him one morning, and I said, he always told me, until I understand the system, what it does, how it works, and quotes to Neely Fuller Jr., I'm just going to be confused. I said, now that I've started reading into it, I'm like, oh, I kind of get it. You were supposed to do what you did as a black man. Okay, that makes sense. It didn't give you an excuse, but it makes sense. I said, but I was supposed to leave. I said, in that, because he's a dark black man, I'm supposed to hate you. I said, I'm supposed to hate you so much that I now go to a white man. And I had actually considered that, if I leave him, who will I date after this? Am I going to date black men, Latino men, Asian men, like, who am I going to date next? No, I'm going to skip all those, and I'm going to go straight to the white man because that's safety and security, right? And I told him, I said, and if I didn't go that route, which I won't and never will, I said, then I was supposed to go and be with another woman. And I started thinking about people I know, friends I have, and just things and going, you know, in that essence of the word, then the system works. It did what it's supposed to do. I completely abandoned what we have as a culture and a group and what my son needs to see for, you know, the system. I'm upholding it if I go these other two routes. And, you know, and it sparked more conversations amongst the two of us. You know, I always tell him, you need to listen to the show because it's a great show and it'll be great tips for you and to listen to and just know so he can learn more about what's happening to him. He's been unemployed for the last couple of years within construction, just different factors. And for me also at work, I'm no longer frustrated. Like, I was really close to quitting on a lot of occasions to, like, just quitting my job and moving on to the next place because it felt like I was going nowhere. But I constantly go. I've gone to the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity for the past 3 years, and I sit at the conference, and all these people have the same experience. And this year, it all made sense. I said, oh, that's just the system working at its fullest. Like, we'll never get to where we want to go because the people who started the conference, the people who run our colleges and universities, are white people, period. And they don't want to change anything, but they're going to make us feel like they do. And so essentially that's my biggest thing. So now, depending on who you talk to and who I'm around, I'm a little militant. They might call me militant, a little bit of a revolutionist, whatever you want to call it. I just think I'm just conscious and aware. That's it. I'm conscious. I'm aware. I see it. I know what it is. I'm not as frustrated. I don't get as angry anymore. And essentially I learn who I should and shouldn't talk to and what happens. So that's essentially the personal piece of it and kind of what I've done so far.
Is it cool if I kind of go back because you shared a lot right there?
Oh, yes, you can. I'm sorry.
No problem. No worries. Okay, I'm gonna try and go back and walk through one at a time. I'm gonna go all the way back to the playground incident. So,
okay.
When you were more confused about racism, white supremacy, you would not have suspected that was a white person, most likely practicing racism, white supremacy, and getting her child away from your non-white son. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
I was more confused. I would have just said, it's late, they just need to go.
Okay.
I would have made an excuse for it.
We do that a lot. Non-white people, we do that a lot, and I think the system encourages us to make excuses for white people when they practice racism, white supremacy, to label it any and everything but them being racist, white supremacists. I'm just curious, did you have a conversation with your son? Like, did you tell him that, you know, these people are racist, or did you just, you know, you knew what it was and left it at that?
He asked me why we had to go, and I told him, I said the people are racist. I said they're white people and they're racist, and I said, now I'll explain it later. Because what I needed to figure out at that moment was how to explain that concept with a 4-year-old. Not so much that he won't get it, but just enough that he kind of understands they don't like you because of the color you are. And he got home and, of course, fell asleep and all kinds of things, and we never really had to go into that conversation. But I did at least say that piece. And it's interesting listening to your show. I'm like, Justice is 10, almost 11 now, I guess, and I'm just fascinated with her understanding of everything, and I'm hoping he'll be that same way when he's 10 or 11. And then I have the courage to constantly keep having these conversations. But it was hard. It was very hard because as a mom, you don't want your children to experience anything like that at such a young age. But he recognizes color. I don't know if he understands color, you know, a white person and a non-white person, if there's differences in how we're treated or what happens. I don't know if he's figured that out yet. But he definitely knows that Daddy is dark brown, Mommy is a lighter brown, and Daddy's good friend is white. He knows that.
Daddy's good friend is what? Just like a friend that...
Yes.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Daddy, yeah, one of his dad's really good friends is white. And my stepfather, my mother's husband, is white as well. He's very exposed.
Wow, that's very interesting. I'm gonna shoot now so that I don't forget. So you said your stepfather is white, is that correct?
He is.
Okay. Since you've become more informed about racism, white supremacy, do you have conversation with him? Do you have contact with him?
I have not had any conversations with him. I haven't had it because he travels a lot, so I haven't had many conversations with him. I have a lot of them with my mom because I actually bought the books for her for Mother's Day, and she started reading them. But I have not had a conversation with him yet. I can only do hindsight with him at this point and go, oh, yeah, that conversation that we had at that time doesn't surprise me.
Wow. You did say you got your mom a copy of Mr. Fuller's book for Mother's Day. Is that accurate?
Yes, and the ISIS papers.
Okay. That I want to just pause to recognize that for a second. Not that I'm in the holidays or anything, but man, if you're going to celebrate, excellent gift, man. Especially if they're going to read it. You said she already started reading. Fantastic.
She did start reading it, yes.
Outstanding. Okay, that'll be real interesting. You'll have to come back and update us as she becomes more informed. I'm curious to see how that will, how her knowledge and understanding will be manifested in her behavior. Very interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I agreed. I am, too. So I will definitely update.
Right on. Okay. Okay. And if there's anything, feel free, put your feet up. This is our broadcast. If there's anything you don't want to, if it's too personal, you don't want to put it out there, no problem. We have tons of stuff to discuss. You said your husband is a darker black male.
Yes.
How do you think that impacted his conduct in your attempt at marriage and him, I guess, not doing the correct thing if he cheated or had an affair of some sort?
I think he's very confused, to be honest. He's slightly aware of things because we have conversations. So he's aware of enough, but he is not very proactive about much of it. It's okay, I know. He's kind of used to it. All his dark black jokes, nicknames people give him, all kinds. He's very used to all of that. That's been lifelong. I think in terms of his behavior, I feel like that's what he was supposed to do. I feel like he isn't comfortable with himself enough that he should have had more self-respect for himself, and I don't feel like he had enough of that in his own self. And we've had those conversations. I said, until you're okay with you and the power of you and the beauty of you, I think you won't be settled in you, and you'll continue the behavior.
How did he respond to that?
He agreed with it, and that's part of his self. He's kind of working on all that right now. We don't talk much about it because it is a very sensitive topic, but he's kind of working all that and trying to reframe and get himself into another space. And I've told him, I said, when I'm done with the books, I want you to read the books. And in the meantime, I try to get him, it's on my iPod. The show is on my iPod, so I try to get him to listen to it as well, versus him just hearing my excitement about it.
Wow.
But he, again, in the concept of, you know, you did these things, you cheated on me and did these things, and now, and I believe this is what was supposed to happen. I said, and that's the system, and I kind of broke down what the system was in all areas of activity and those kinds of things. I said, does it make sense to you that, you know, this is where I was supposed to go based on your behavior? And he totally understood. He understood that. He said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Wow. I'm not married. For the folks listening, I'm not married. I'm not in any sort of sexual relationship. I do not have children. But that is quite fascinating to me, that having a better understanding of racism, white supremacy can be helpful in attempting a marriage with another victim of white supremacy. Let me ask, has getting a better understanding of racism, white supremacy, has that benefited you in, you know, attempting to have a successful marriage under a system of white supremacy?
It has, to an extent, in essence of, I feel like I understand his behaviors and some of the things he does a lot better, so that my level of frustration and confusion and being upset or angry, I've been able to move past a lot of that, understanding the whole system. And the other piece, it opened up a lot of communication between the two of us, a lot of communication, on a level we probably have never had in 6 years we've been together.
Wow. That, I will tell listeners, let me make sure I'm reiterating, because I'm not speaking from experience, and that's why I was real pleased about this program. I'm not married. I do not have kids. I'm not in any sort of sexual relationship, but that still fits the exact same pattern that I have observed, that for victims of white supremacy, as your understanding of racism, white supremacy increases, your ability to have constructive communication with other victims also increases. Wow, that's good to know. That's good to know. You said that experiencing these problems in your attempted marriage, this is what the system of white supremacy wants. It wants you to be angry with your husband, black male, be angry with him. He didn't do the correct thing. He did not treat you correctly, and to kick him to the curb and either get a white man or get a female. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Can you kind of describe that thought process when you were going through that? Like, I don't know, were you considering that ever? Were you considering either getting a white man, or going the so-called homosexual route?
I had considered more so the white man route, but
okay.
In my revelation of the whole system, the homosexual part, and listening to a lot of the shows, and really listening to all the pieces about homosexuality and things like that, that piece, it made a lot of sense to me that, if I didn't go with men, I would have went with women. I considered the white man piece, and a lot of that was because I felt like after I had what I had been through with him, there was a time where I just didn't feel like any black man was worth the trouble. It wasn't worth the trouble, wasn't worth the stress. How do I know they're going to be different, et cetera, et cetera. And so I had considered dating a white man because how it's portrayed in media, I will say in media, because this is not what I see when I look at my mother and my stepdad's relationship. They have a more typical relationship, but when you watch it in media, he's like, as usual, the savior, right? So you think, well, I'll go get me a white man and he'll save me from whatever, and I won't have any of these problems and stresses anymore. And ta-da, it's done. And I'm happy I never reacted to it, because that would have been a, post-divorce kind of a concept. But I'm happy I never reacted to it, and I'm very happy I became aware, and I'm still learning about everything, because it just it reinforced why I do love black men so much. And And especially why I liked him so much, because he was a dark black man, and I just thought he was the most beautiful essence of everything. And I believe that about all black men, that they are, and they have that. But what's hard, and this is what I have to battle with my 4-year-old, is that he knows that he's the best of everything. Does he know what he truly means and represents in this world beyond what's on television and what he's reading in his textbooks and what he's seeing on the walls and different things like that?
Wow. Context of white supremacy, Gus T Renegade, and Privilege, our guest, Mrs. Che Abram. Other people have said the exact same thing, that the system of white supremacy conditions you to see white men and white women as the ideal mate. That, you know, if you get that white man, that will just be the best thing. He'll be able to take care of you. It'll be fantastic. We get conditioned to that's the knight in shining armor from from kindergarten. That's what you've been conditioned to perceive as the best, and it's the same for white women. And I think it's particularly effective. I think Dr. Welsing calls it contrast programming, when that is juxtaposed to black males in the system of white supremacy and all of the problems and abuse that is heaped on black males. I mean, it can be tough. It can be really tough. Well, I guess your view, and just not only with your husband, with the black males in general, do you see that pattern of black males not having self-esteem, self-regard, just not thinking very much of themselves?
I believe so. I think a lot of black men have a false confidence in some ways. I feel like a lot of them, you know, I'm cute, I'm the best, I'm dressed the best, I have the best car, I have this, and I feel like all of that is constantly this battle within themselves to really figure out, are they the best? Are they happy, really? And I feel like that is about a lot of black men when I watch black men, and it comes out in different ways when you see them and what they do. I think Navy Schooler Jr. talks about showing off a lot, and usually when I watch a lot of black men in different areas and out walking around and different things like that, there's like this need to show off. And whether it be clothes, whether it be the car, whether it be the music system in the car, just whatever it is. And I watch them sometimes going, are you really happy with you? Because that's really the problem. Like, the car is a car. You're not going to die with it. It's not going to get buried with you. Like, that's all it was a material item that is no longer worth its value. So, you know, you are the only you have. So do you understand that you are the only you have, and do you understand your value? And I think a lot of black men, when you watch anything and everything, when you listen to music, when you read books, just do research, when you just are in class, at the workplace, you see black men get so emasculated on like a regular basis in all kinds of ways. It's really scary because, again, I have a 4-year-old that I'm raising in this world, and I'm really worried that this is what he has to deal with, and how will I best prepare him for that. And so I do feel like that's a lot of the problem. And black women, we as black women, it's real easy. We are very strong women. And I feel like that's just who we are by nature, and it's not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing. But it's really hard for us as black women to go in and just let a man be a man. And at the same time, does he know what being a man is? That's like that battle in a lot of, I think, black male-female relationships is, do you know what a man is? And do I know my role as a woman, in essence? To step back and let him do what he's supposed to do, let him child rear, let him do different aspects, or am I going to step in and control everything? I was raised by a lot of strong women. in my family. And so in my world, from what I've seen, the women always rule. And there weren't very many men and weren't very many husbands in marriages. So it was kind of like, stepping into my relationship, it was like, what am I supposed to do? I really don't even know the role I'm supposed to have. I really don't know how I'm supposed to function. And that's part of my development over the last 6 years or so, is being happy with the me that I am. And now helping him my husband cultivate him being happy with the person he is, what he has, and realizing all of his potential and his gifts as a black man. Just wonderful.
Wow. That as you were talking, that reminded me when Dr. Joy DeGroove, she was on the program the second time she was here just last month, and she talked about how a lot of exactly what you're saying, a lot of the conflict between black males and black females, she said invariably it always centers around manhood and the black male feeling that he's not being allowed to be a man, or the black female feeling that the black male is not owning up to his responsibilities as a man, that issue of manhood and emasculation is always present. And she said often directly, she said the people that she talks to and the work that she does, those terms are used explicitly. And I think that is a major aspect of racism, white supremacy, just completely disallowing black males to be men and black females to be women. And I think that is a major part of the disruption of relationships between black males and black females, major aspect. And it sounds like what I've often said, I think a lot of that could be mitigated if we had a better understanding of racism, white supremacy. We would not blame one another for our shortcomings. We would be blaming white people who believe in and practice racism, white supremacy. Do you have any questions, or excuse me, do you have any thoughts on that? Or I can ask some other questions. Do you have any thoughts on what I just shared, or?
I agree with it all. It's just, it's very hard. It's a very hard place to be in. Because we'll get into the conference later, but that's like the pre-conference session I went to was all about black men and their masculinity, and essentially, in essence, of what does that mean in higher education. And there was this debate around what it is. Well, you shouldn't teach a black man what he's supposed to be. Well, you should teach a black man what he's supposed to be. And I'm sitting in the room thinking, none of us know what a black man is supposed to be. Because every time I watch TV, I don't really see them being men. That was my simplest thing I could think of, but it does come up a lot, and I think it's a cause of a lot of stress and angst in black female-male relationships.
Wow. That's why I said I wanted to run the program this way, because this will sync nicely. People, if you did not listen to the program earlier today with Dr. Khalif Muhammad, we ended talking about this exactly, and he was saying the same thing. He was saying that going and being with a white female, that they didn't have a lot of the same problems that black females have, obviously, in a system of white supremacy, and he didn't encounter as much direct verbal conflict with them. They had resources, exactly what we were talking about. We didn't get to finish that part, but yeah, I think this is a nice way to pick back up on that conversation, because it's exactly where we ended with that discussion. Wow, okay, so wow, let's see. I'll pause there with the relationship part of it, because I'm sure some people will have questions around that, so I'll pause there. I also wanted to make sure I didn't forget, because you said that as you as you have become less confused about racism, white supremacy, that you said they don't want to change? I'm assuming that you're talking about white people. Were you implying that white people are not interested in discontinuing the practice of racism, white supremacy?
I don't believe so.
I
don't believe so. And I mean, I work with, I'm around enough white people. And I'm sure you've always heard the terms thrown around, white privilege, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, they talk about it a lot. And they want you to call them on their behaviors about their white supremacy racism. And some of them, and they're very okay with me having the conversation. There's one person in particular I'm very okay with having and using the terms that I use, white supremacy racism, and non-white. He is very comfortable with those terms. He is a white man. And he has no problem with me using those terms. But I also, when I sit and talk to him about those terms, part of me is like, he gets it. The other part of me is like, you're never going to change, because this is who you've been, you know, in essence, since birth. You use these behaviors. You cut people off. You get upset with them. You know, you talk over them. You say, oh, I understand, and then you talk on and on and on, and you never really address my concern, my question, my issue. You know, you lay the ground rules and don't abide by them yourself. There's just these things that, you know, and that's only a few that I have observed and been able to key into. They don't pay attention to the fact that, you know, you've conditioned me as a black woman to not look you in the eye, but you're going to yell at me about looking you in the eye. You tell me to speak out about diversity and say, okay, this is a racist institution, yet, you know, I know at some point you're going to find some way to fire me, possibly, or you might find some way just to make it a little bit harder for me. And I don't think they want to give that up. They have a lot at stake if they give that up. If they let non-white people have the power, the energy, money, the resources, you know, in all the areas of activity that we need it to be, they would have nothing. Because there are a lot of us, a whole lot of us, and they would have nothing. And so, or they would be at the bottom of the barrel. And I think, you know, if I was sitting on top of the world like Bill Gates and some of the others in the top 5% of the world, I wouldn't want to give it up either. But yet at the same time, they want to always say, well, we're really interested in having diversity. Why? To make you more competitive as a white person. It has nothing to do with my personal gain as a non-white person. It has everything to do with your personal gain as a white person. And they know it, and they're never going to say it. And they won't. And I just don't believe they're going to give it up. So I think the best thing we can do is learn the behaviors and try our hardest to counter it. And I believe the more of us that are educated about
the second annual Nat Turner Day Weekend Celebration 2010, The Resurrection of Haiti, Friday, August 20th to Sunday, August 22nd, at the Church of the Advocate, 1801 West Diamond Street, Philadelphia, PA, sponsored by the Children of Southampton, featuring Umar Abdullah Johnson, the Irritated Genie of Southeast, Sister Nefertari, Mary Lou Nzinga, the Universal African Dance and Drum Ensemble, the Lest We Forget Black Holocaust Slave Museum, and a special feature, the Nat Turner Day African Insurrection Musical with Brothers Keeper, the African Marketplace, and much, much more. The cost for the entire weekend, $50 for black adults, $25 for black students and children under 12, and $25 for black elders 65 and older. For more information, contact the Children of Southampton at www.ourcause.com. That's www.ourkos.com or 888-817-3235. That's toll free at 888-817-3235.
Hello? Where did I go?
You're still here. I got disconnected.
Oh, okay.
You didn't go anywhere. That was
where'd I go?
My apologies, listeners, and Mrs. Abram. All back now, should be good to go. I wanted to, I guess if you could clarify, you said that all this so-called diversity from white people is about them being able to become more competitive. Can you break that down for us?
Yes. In the world, the world is a global world, and usually when you're in, and at least in my areas in higher education, there's this big need for students to be competitive so that they can go out and then work in the global world, meaning you can work with people from other areas of the world, and you can essentially assimilate into that and not offend them, make them upset, etc. And so actually, at the conference, it was said by a white woman that the white parents on her campus asked for diversity so that their white children could work with underserved groups or people of color, so that when they go out and work in the world at big corporations and things anywhere, that they're used to working with the people they're going to have to work with in those communities or those industries or wherever they're going to go. That's why they wanted diversity. And so, and I sat in that session this year, and I wasn't upset by the comment. It made sense to me, that comment. Some people got upset by that comment because they felt you should genuinely just want, diversity and want, quote unquote, people of color or non-white people on your campus because that's what's right. That's our human right, is to be educated. And she was upset with her white parents. And to me, it just made sense. I sat in that space saying, well, that makes a lot of sense to me, that they would want that, is so that their kids can be more competitive and they can continue on up the ranks and make all the money that they make and do what they do and continue the system.
Wow. Justice is here. I want to check to see if she has some questions, but I want listeners, keep in mind what Mrs. Abram just shared, because David Crockett, he was supposed to be on the program today, but he was being a dad. He had to take care of his child. He is a non-white male, black male professor at the University of South Carolina. He will be here on Wednesday, and he has research. He studies marketing and advertising, and he has research about what she just talked about in terms of white people wanting so-called cultural capital so that they can be more marketable because they have spent time doing work on so-called diversity or so-called white privilege, showing that they are, in my view, showing that they are refined in their ability to practice racism, white supremacy. Keep that in mind for the Wednesday broadcast, because that'll be brought back up. And I think you are right on the money. But I want to check and see if Justice has some questions. Justice, if you have some questions for Ms. Abram, please go right ahead.
Hello. I don't have any questions at this moment. I'm just listening. Thank you.
Groovy. No problem. No problem. Okay. You brought up the conference, but I want to save that part for last, so that it'll be TIMWISE and then the conference, because they're kind of connected anyway. When we spoke on Thursday, you shared, and this will be the second time today we have a non-white person who shared about what TIMWISE, the connection that they had to TIMWISE prior to hearing him on this program. I guess, can you talk about the first couple times, I guess, that you heard about TIMWISE, the first couple times that you saw him speak, and the impact that he had on you?
Yes. I first heard TIMWISE at the conference in, was it 2010? So in 2008, I guess I went to the conference, and he spoke at the conference. And I admit I was in awe of him. Going, we need to bring you to campus so you can talk to all the people. Oh, my gosh, you are the greatest thing ever. That year, I did not buy any of his books. So he came back the second year. He actually has a pre-conference session at the conference. I don't go to, but he does that. Plus, he also does, he's a like a keynote speaker at the conference each year. So last year he came and he spoke again because it was all about post-racial America because Obama had been elected, et cetera. So in 2008-ish, 2007, 2008, it was all about, will he make it to the presidency? And then in 2009, it was he made it and what's going on, and let's talk about that kind of thing. And this year kind of was another piece of it. And last year, in 2009, I bought a lot of his books. Actually, I think I bought all of them except for the most recent one. And that was, June 2009. And I was in awe of him, and he had told these wonderful stories and had he made all these scientific references. Like he'd use words and say, well, if you don't know what this is, and he'd break it down for people. But he'd go on, and he would use a lot of big words, and he'd reference, books, a lot of books, or his bibliography. There was a lot of white people who wrote books about, the Cosby Show and why white people were okay with the Cosby Show, and he'd reference some other things. And last year, specifically, he capped it off with a story about his daughter being in disagreement that Morgan Freeman could be God in the Evan Almighty movies. And Evan Almighty. And I remember that story in particular because at the end of it he said, his daughter, I guess, was 5 or so at the time, and he said that, you can go deep with children, but you just can't stay there for long. So you can talk to them about anything, you just have to be quick about it. So he went through the story. So in between June and I probably would say this fall, I was talking to my friend of mine who turned me on to the show because I had mentioned Tim Wise. And I said, yeah, he's great speakers. We had done some diversity stuff on campus, and I was talking to my friend about it, and I happened to mention Tim Wise, and she goes, he's on this show we listened to. And so, and you have to hear him. He's an admitted racist. And I was like, what? And so I started listening to the show. So then I tuned into a few. I have not listened to all of his episodes on the cows, but I listened to a few of his shows and went again to listen to him. I couldn't wait to listen to him this June so I could see what he had to say. And again, I was a black person who was in awe of him. I used to defend him. I was everything, right? So this year I go and I sit at his session because and I'm just interested in what he has to say because having now been made aware of a lot of things, yes, he, in my eyes, much like your eyes and probably other viewers on the show who've seen him and things, he in my mind, does consciously practice it. So he comes again, and he almost to the T said the same speech he said last year, using the same references, breaking down a lot of scientific stuff, and actually ended with the same exact story in the same way, same time frame. But he was advertising a whole new book. But it was essentially the same conversation from the previous year. But he advertised a whole new book. And not as many of the non-white people in the room went to get his book and things. But I walked out of that session, and I was with a colleague, and my colleague said, oh, he was great. And, in my mind, I'm going, no, he's just white racist and whatever. And she said something to the effect of wanting to bring him on campus and ask him a question. I said, no, the question that needs to be asked of him is what is he going to do to stop white supremacy racism? And that's where our conversation ended. So having listened to the show and become more aware, I was able to analyze his speech a lot differently than the past 2 years when I've watched his speech, him speak. Because I was able to say, I remember him saying things about Dr. Frances Welsing and her background, and he doesn't have her background at all, but he wanted to comment on her scientific knowledge, which I found interesting because in his speech, I can't remember exactly what he says, but he refers to some scientific information like he has like a PhD in biology or something like that. And I found that very, very interesting. And again, all of his references were none of the people, at least non-white people I know of, and I know who at least have started this work. He's still referring only to his group of people. And I don't know if he gets paid to come to the conference or not or whatnot, because he is there for the whole conference and for quite a few things. But I found it just really interesting walking in to his session this year with my insight and was like, wow, you're really good. I was like, you're good at what you do. And so long as you speak like this and still look like Jesus standing up there, it won't change. It'll be, because he would say white folks, but it wasn't. I remember you asking him when he speaks, does he say you should be suspicious of me? And in my eyes, from the last 3 years, he has never said you should be suspicious of me. He just said you kind of should be suspicious of white folks. But it's not like, but he's like, but I'm different than white folks because I'm an anti-racist, whatever that means. So that's essentially my view on Tim Wise. And there are a lot of non-white people who disagree with me. They think he's the greatest thing ever. I stopped talking about him at work. I just don't talk about him.
I have heard Tim Wise in person. I actually heard him in person before he was on the cows from Blog Talk Radio in June of 2009. I heard him in person, and he shared the exact same anecdote about his daughter thinking that God could not possibly be a black person. That was how he ended his little spiel, and the non-white people, victims of white supremacy, immediately scurried downstairs to purchase his books and get autographs and just rub on the hem of his garment and praise Tim Wise. Did you hear him mention Mr. Fuller during his presentation? At any time, have you ever heard him mention Mr. Fuller?
Not at all.
Me either. I've talked to quite a few non-white people who have heard Timothy give presentations. No one has ever heard him mention Mr. Fuller's name. He has come on this program and said, oh yeah, I tell people, Mr. Fuller, he said that. Go back and dig through the archives. I'll sound clip it if I have the time and energy before he comes back on July 11th. But yeah, he has said that repeatedly. Oh yeah, I tell people about Mr. Fuller's work. I recommend that they get his book. It is my view that Tim Wise is flat out being deceptive when he gives his presentations. In my view, he seems to have no problem, I suspect, being untruthful when he's speaking with non-white people. He seems to have no problem with that at all, just saying anything, because he does not think non-white people are going to be suspicious of him. They're not going to challenge anything that he says. He can just say whatever, and they will accept it as truth. I don't know. You said you bought his books.
I have his books. They are autographed on my bookshelf. And I have never opened one. I haven't read any of them. They're sitting there. I have them. I have them.
Wow. And do you know any other non-white people who, think, hey, I don't know about this Timothy guy. I'm leery. He might sound good. Do you know any other non-white people who, other than folks that you might have heard on this program? Do you know anyone in that group?
No.
Wow.
And it's not, and I only really at the conference. I'm only really around the people that I go to the conference with from my workplace. So, no, I haven't met any. And I'd be interested, to know if any of the listeners have gone to the conference and what their opinions would be as well.
Wow. I want to move to the conference next, but my last one on Tim Wise, I want to make sure I heard that clearly. You talking about Tim Wise, admitted white supremacist, and just making an effort to share your view on him with other non-white people, victims of white supremacy, could that potentially be a source of conflict, like you sharing your view about Tim Wise with other non-white people?
Yes, it is.
Context of white supremacy, justice, Gus T Renegade, and our guest, Mrs. Che Abram. Before we get to the conference, I did want to say your friends told you about the program. Did you let them know that you were going to be a guest on the program today?
I did.
Oh, okay.
They're in Europe, so I did. I don't know if they'll listen or not, but I told them I downloaded it on my iPod, so they catch it.
Right on. Okay, the conference we've been referencing for folks who are listening in or calling. We have a full switchboard, so you should have quite a few folks.
Oh, wow.
To share their view if they've been to the conference or other things that we've been chatting about. This conference is the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in American Higher Education, NCORE. It's linked in the description for this program. You can click it. You can see the website. You'll see exactly what it says in the description. The usual suspects. You'll see photographs for Tim Wise, Dr. Peggy McIntosh, Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. All these folks apparently have participated. I have never gone to this conference. I was telling Mrs. Abram, I first heard about it at the White Privilege Conference back in La Crosse in April. They had flyers and material promoting it. That was the first time I heard about it, but I've never been. You are a 3-time veteran at this conference, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I guess what has your experience been? And I guess before we even do that, can you give us your understanding of what the purpose of this conference is?
So my understanding of the purpose of the conference is to bring up all things race and ethnicity plus some in higher education. And actually, I have made a list of a few of the things that it goes over, but LGBT kinds of things, financial aid, social justice, hip-hop and culture and its effect on students in higher education, how to recruit and retain some, relationships with outside organizations like other social justice agencies, depending, on where you are. It focuses on all the quote-unquote people of color groups. There's performances and films. There's just, as you had said at the White Privilege Conference, there's a bundle of information, but essentially is to basically work on all these initiatives or to have crucial conversations on university campuses across the country. And depending on where you work and what you do, there's something for you.
Okay, so they have this. We chatted, so this sounds similar for folks who are listening in. This sounds similar to the White Privilege Conference in that they have workshops, keynote speakers. I'm sure they have literature that you can books and Tim Wise's books. This sounds similar to the White Privilege Conference. Does that seem in the ballpark?
Yes.
Okay. This is the big one from the White Privilege Conference. Did they have definitions? Like in your 3 years at the conference, have you seen definitions for, racism, white supremacy, white privilege? Do you see definitions being given out at the conference?
No. That's part of the reason why I contacted you. No. None that, probably the only thing that might be defined would be diversity, and not even a definition, more of what it means, what groups they're focusing on each campus. That probably would be the only thing that you might have a clear understanding of when you go into a presentation. Is diversity on our campus means these people. Other than that, no. Okay. And I actually made a lovely list of terms. Let's see.
If you have your list, can we hear your list of terms?
There are a lot of them. There was, barriers. There's polarization, browning, equity, or equality, well-meaning, anti-racist, internalization. There were some fun ones. There's transnational. Didn't know what that one was. The underrepresented is common, predominantly competency, white, culture, cross-culture, indigenous, prejudice, intercultural, social justice, minority, heterosexism, power, consciousness, interracial, multiracial. Those are just a few. There was more. I broke down some things more specifically, but that was internalized racial oppression. Those are some of the ones that I was like, I have no idea what these words mean. What are actual definitions of these words? And they're used a lot. Like these words I pulled out of when I went through the book the other day. I pulled these actually out of the titles mostly for a lot of the workshops and keynote speaker sessions and things like that.
I do want to. Oh, go ahead.
Commonly used terms. Oh, they're very commonly used terms that you hear all over the conference.
I want to remind folks, Gus T Renegade, I have not attended this conference, which has been going on for some time, I believe, 20 years, I think more than 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
23 years, there you go. I haven't attended, but it sounds like something that I have participated in recently, particularly with the definitions. And I want to give people that definition again, because that was, for me, that was a moment that I will not soon forget. On the train ride back from La Crosse, Wisconsin, upon my exit from the White Privilege Conference, I was sitting on the train, and I looked up the word confusion and dropped down to the second definition, a disorderly jumble. Fit exactly what I saw with regards to terms and with regards to just we're just going to throw everything in here. Racism, LGBTQ. They had an I at the White Privilege Conference. It was LGBTQI, and a non-white person inquired as to what the I stood for, and this person worked for the conference and said, I don't know. And I'll make sure I throw in this person, in addition to being a non-white female victim of white supremacy, also said she was so-called gay. I even think she said she was bisexual, whatever that means. But she said she didn't know what the I stood for. Disorderly jumble. You've gone to the conference 3 times, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. With regards to the definitions, was that a concern that you had, like, when you were a little, or when you first began going to the conference, was that a concern that you had, whether they bothered to define terms that were being used?
No, not at all. My first 2 years. I just kind of rolled. I went assuming I knew what they meant.
Wow.
And didn't bother to look them up. I've never prompted myself to look them up to say, what does any of this mean? It actually wasn't until I started listening to your show and doing my readings that I went, oh, I really need to start paying attention to this. Because what does this mean?
Wow. Would it be accurate to say, as your understanding of racism, white supremacy has evolved, your attention to and appreciation for specific and clear definitions has increased?
It has.
That is also a correlation I've noted. I think even Justice demonstrates that now at her young age of 11. I'll check since I just brought her up. Justice, if you have any questions for Mrs. Abram, go right ahead.
I don't have any questions at this moment. Just still listening.
No problem there. Wow. I'm conflicted because you have met a lot of people at this conference. You said you met, or I don't know if you met, but Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. was at the conference. Or you did. You said you met Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. at the conference. Non-Mighty Wick, my partner, I was going to say partner in crime, but I don't want to say that. My partner in replacing white supremacy with justice at the White Privilege Conference, he actually observed Shakti Butler and her presentation. I didn't see it, but I heard about it. Shakti Butler also has been at the NCORE presentation. I believe she was there this past year. I think that'll have some special resonance for him. I said it now. I'm conflicted. I will make sure that I get this out. I do not have any beef with Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. More than anything, he is a victim of racism, white supremacy. I am not criticizing anything. I found it interesting. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up. You met Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. at the conference. Can you share your experience with meeting Dr. Moore?
I haven't met him, and that's my own fault. I haven't actually gone up to him to introduce myself, but I have observed him at the conference, and why I say, and I'll explain why I haven't introduced myself to him. So the very first year I went, I knew people who had been to and talked about the White Privilege Conference, and I knew he ran and organized and started the White Privilege Conference. And so coming to NCORE, I thought it was a great honor, and I'd find my way to going to meet him. And I remember watching him just walk around the conference, and I guess the lightest way to put it is I just didn't get a good vibe from him. I didn't like his persona very much. So I actually kind of just stayed away. I did go by his White Privilege Conference table. He has one every year in the exhibit area, and just kind of looked at the title of the conference, talked to someone that was at the table, and kind of realized, I was like, oh, that's not really for me. That's more for white people. And kind of never revisited. But I've watched him over the last 3 years. So the second year I saw him again, same feeling about him. And then I happened to be flipping through the archives and saw him on the show. And I tuned in to listen to him on the show. And for me, listening to him on the show and knowing what I know now, yes, I would just say he's just a confused person. And I probably will next year go introduce myself to him or something. But I just feel like he's just a confused person. That's probably the easiest way and lightest way I could put it.
I played it I played it for him. I don't feel bad about this at all because I played it when he was on the program. Can I get your thoughts on this sound clip? This is, I said it before, I think this is probably one of the more profound statements that has been made on the C.O.W.S. This is when Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. was on the program in May of 2009. Let's see. Okay, here we go.
And it may be, and I'm not unwilling to critically look at this, it may be just a personal desire on my part to find a kind of soothing lotion so it doesn't feel so painful what it is that you're saying. So I'm not unwilling to look at that.
Feedback on that coming from Dr. Eddie Moore Jr., founder of the White Privilege Conference.
I would, yeah. I think that probably would be the easiest way. I think he describes himself when he says that, highly confused, and doesn't want to address it, doesn't want to deal with it, and despite what I've heard his conference is supposed to do, really isn't addressing any of it. He is doing the whole kumbaya effect, in my mind. That's just how I felt about. That's kind of just the vibe I get about it. And that comment.
Non-Mighty Wick was able to get video footage edited and put together. One of them is on my blog. If you go to racism-notes.blogspot.com, you can see part of that footage. It's right on the front page. You can watch it. I think it's in 3 parts, might be 4, but I think it's 3 parts. But yeah, you can go to the blog and you can see part of it, and then from there you can just go to his YouTube page and you can check it out. But the kumbaya, yeah, we talked about, and again, anybody, I'm not into criticizing other victims. Just he was here. I talked to him directly about all this, and those are the terms he used. He said that just now. That was his voice. Soothing lotion, kumbaya. That's his term. That's what he said at the conference, and yeah, I'll leave that. I'll leave it at that. Before I wanted to check, because we do have full switchboard, so before I hit the phone line, when we spoke on Thursday, you said the Boondocks, do more shows on the Boondocks. You will get your, I will comply. Next Sunday we'll do another one, white people permitting. I'll do another broadcast on the Boondocks. Just what you heard about the titles. If this program had come on 1 hour later, I would have watched tonight's episode and I would have had comments on it. But just what you heard about the titles of tonight's episode and next week's episode. I'll read it again so you can get it fresh in your mind. But tonight's episode is titled Pause. It should have aired. People on the East Coast, if anybody on the East Coast is listening, you should have been able to see this episode already so you can share your thoughts if you called in. But tonight's episode, Granddad is cast as the leading man by mega superstar of stage and screen, Winston Jerome. But when the theater group turns out to be a homoerotic evangelical cult, it's up to Huey and Riley to put a pause to it. That's tonight's episode. Next week's episode is A Date with the Booty Warrior. Having conquered his fear of prison rape, Tom volunteers Huey, Riley, and some classmates. Volunteers to lead Huey, Riley, and some classmates on a trip to jail as a part of a Scared Stiff program. But when a riot breaks out, Tom has to get the kids and his delicate backside out of jail in one piece. Do you have any thoughts on those two episodes of the Boondocks?
After listening to probably your last few episodes about the Boondocks and being an avid watcher of the series myself, probably and hopefully a lot of people are, the whole homosexuality piece is huge. And it's funny because I actually, after we talked on Thursday, I went and tried to find some way to contact Aaron Magruder so he could get on the show. And I happened to come across a clip of him on YouTube. And I think in the clip, I think the only little piece I really caught, because my computer wasn't logging right, but the piece I really caught was, part of something along the lines of him ending the show or not doing the comic strip anymore. He was like, he felt we lost control of our society, our country, one, and two, he said he felt like his shows say it all. He doesn't need to say anything else. It shows you everything you need to see and be aware of. And I thought that was really interesting because these two shows, it sounds like one of them is kind of in direct reference to Tyler Perry and his whole climb to the top. And based on a lot of the shows we've listened to, and that concept of black male masculinity, again, black men in dresses, and there's a lot of shows with black men in dresses. I feel like, he'll do a humorous side of that, but you'll see some things that you might not be really keyed into, because it is interesting that in Tyler Perry's essence, that is strangely, even I will admit, when I watched Tyler Perry, it's hilarious. And it really didn't dawn on me until I started listening to the show. Why is he dressing up like his grandmother? He could have totally just got an actor to do that. That's strange to me. And then, and I listened to some things about the movie Precious, because I kept trying to figure out what the heck does Tyler Perry have to do with this movie. And then, I looked at him, and there's Lee Daniels and this whole cast of people, and you're like, oh, all of you people are interested in abusing and subjugating non-white people. Makes sense to me. And so, I think he does a humorous way of showing a lot of people ways into the system of white supremacy that you probably won't pay attention to otherwise. You're just going to watch TV and not pay attention to it. You're going to drift over it. And the Booty Warrior, yeah, that says it itself. The title alone says what it's supposed to say. Just be wary. But I'm excited to watch it so I can pick stuff out.
Yep. that's what I'll be. I don't know if it'll be tonight because so we are having a very active June. I don't know if I'll be able to watch the one tonight this evening after the program because we'll be back tomorrow morning very quickly, less than 12 hours. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Man, I'm not a morning person, but we'll be back tomorrow morning for Graham Raymond. He is a writer for The Village Voice, and he's doing a massive series on a white person who secretly recorded enforcement officials in the New York Police Department, 81st Precinct, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And I mean, it's incredible, the stuff that these white people were doing. A lot of it he got recorded. They had a black woman, they arrested her she was standing in her yard, and they arrested her because she didn't have ID, broke both of her wrists. They had another black person, they arrested him, took him to jail, and didn't charge him with anything. Just took him to jail, no charge. Anyway, tomorrow morning we'll be back. Groovy. As I said, we have a full phone line. I'm going to go to the phone lines, if that is all right with you, Mrs. Abram.
It is.
Groovy. I'll hit the phone lines and see if folks have some questions to ask. Yeah, I'm just going to go straight down the line. Person who called in with a blocked number, your line is open if you have some questions.
Is that me?
That is you. Yes, ma'am.
Greetings. Hello. I just wanted to ask you all, since you were discussing Boondocks, and hello to your guest, and Justice, too. I've missed Justice. Hello. Can you tell me, the actor that does the voice for Uncle Ruckus, is that Gary Anthony Williams or someone else? Are either of you aware? Okay. Do you know that?
I think that's him. I will double check as we roll through the episodes to make sure, but I believe that's him.
Okay, well, let me just tell you what happened after last week's show. So I get off of the phone, we're on the Cow show, turn on the TV, and it's Boston Legal. Now, I worked with him on Soul Plane when he played Flame, the lip gloss wearing, homosexual, effeminate flight attendant. So I'm looking at it, and in this episode of Boston Legal, he's playing a black male who is shy and basically has no power. So he feels more powerful when he's dressed in drag as a black woman named Clarice with the blonde wig, who's coming in, filing a lawsuit against his employer because they wouldn't give him time off for maternity leave because he wanted to adopt a baby from China. And he thought he was getting sexually harassed. This is all in drag with the big boobs and everything. You can look it up online. When you look up his acting reel, there's a clip of it there. But it just made me remember that you said pay attention to a person's body of work. And when I looked at his demo reel and remembering the role from Soul Plane, and then found out that he was playing Uncle Ruckus on Boondocks, a show full of, like, all these homosexual references, it was like, wow. Like, is he the Manchurian Candidate? And then Cowbell, I believe he's married to a white woman because he has a son in the picture that I saw online, and it looks like the son's mother must be a white female. So I was just like, oh, God, there's all kind of confusion going on here. I wasn't aware if either of you knew that.
It is Gary Anthony Williams. That is the gentleman who does Uncle Ruckus. I'm not sure if he's married to a white woman or not, but I am looking at what appears to be his offspring and looks very pale. Yeah, I don't know who he's married to.
I saw a picture of him with a female, and I assumed that was his wife. I saw the picture of the little boy afterward, but it's just really disturbing to me that somebody's whole body of work is overshadowed with projects, that tend to feminize black males.
Wow. And, I mean, Uncle Ruckus has an appetite for white women. I mean, hey, they are, matter of fact, wait a minute.
And from the Johnny, whatever that show was, for white males.
No relation. After much thinking in my mind, I realized that Tiger Woods is not responsible for his latest act. No, he is not. Look here. To be allowed to lay with one white woman is certainly a gift from God up above. But to be blessed was laying with 2 or more white women, Lord? Oh, that is beyond all human comprehension. His damn child nigger brain must have exploded inside his skull. Anyway, this here is Uncle Ruckus, sounding off and signing off.
Nothing else need be said. My apologies for the interruption. 818.
Oh, I was going to say, didn't he like white men too? From that country racist singer episode?
Johnny Rebel. Yes. I definitely thought that was a date. I mean, you can go back and listen to the episode. Anybody who wants to tell me that was not set up like a date, them eating ice cream sundaes together with nuts on top and riding on the Ferris wheel, and the awkward moment when Johnny Rebel is about to leave and they're going to embrace, yeah.
She's got a Frantz Fanon complex, male or female, so long as it's white. Man, oh man, victim of white supremacy. Sad. Did you have any questions for the guest or? No, but I really enjoyed the information that she shared. Not at this time, but I really did enjoy it. I'm very glad that you're on the show.
Thank you.
Right on. I'm going to scroll through the calls, and I'll get everybody once I go through and see if folks have questions and such. Person that called in from the other blocked number, your line is open.
Hello?
Gotcha. 909. Yes, sir.
Hey, how you doing, Gus and Justice and Miss Abram? I wanted to ask you about your relationship, as far as, has your husband, does he seem happier, that you seem to understand him a little bit more? Because, well, yeah, that's the question. That's what I was curious about.
He does, to be honest. I had mentioned earlier, it opened up a whole new line of communication with us. It was actually interesting because once I kind of got into the work and awareness and started having conversations with him, it helped me kind of see a side of him I didn't see before. And he started sharing more with me, and now we just have this conversation about anything and everything. I mean, a lot of it is related to the topic of, the system of white supremacy. But like we were walking, for example, today we were walking through the mall, and there was a lot of interracial couples, black men, white women, and I had used, the acronym SAD, and he was saying, what does that mean? And I kind of just gave him an idea of what that meant, and he was like, oh, okay, I can see that. And then I asked him, I said, is it me, or is it when you see the black men with the white women that it seems like they're just like there to get a whole bunch of stuff out of her and throw her away? And he said, yeah. He said, and I think black women, white do the same thing with white men, and I don't see that side that often. So it just kind of opens this conversation and this thought process that we've just kind of never had before. So he does seem happier and a lot more comfortable with where we are.
Yeah, I'm just smiling because, I never really related to females, as far as talking to them about politics or, social issues and stuff like that. So, yeah, to hear you and hear you say what you're saying is pretty cool for me. And I can see how that would make them, happier and whatnot. So, yeah, thank you again, and I'll just keep listening.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, 909. Repeat appearance, I believe. I'll split this. Justice, if you have questions, you can roll. If not, Dr. Khalif Muhammad, a.k.a. SynQ, if you have questions, you can go as well.
You can call me Mr. or Doctor or SynQ or just you or Khalif. I don't at the moment. I'm just listening. I'm glad that I got the call to get on, though. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Tuesday, it's in the computer. Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific. Dr. Khalif Muhammad, a.k.a. Sin-Q, will be back with us. We'll do part 2. Let's see. Just Jones Enterprises. If you have questions for Mrs. Abram, your line is open. Or, wait a minute, it's not open yet. Okay, okay, gotcha. Just Jones Enterprises, your line is open.
It's Just Jones. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, hi. Hi, Gus. This is Just Jones. I had a question. Do you guys think it's somehow easier for women to come to terms with the reality of racism, white supremacy, than men, because men are the primary targets of, well, of course, both non-white people, both men and women, specifically black people, are, damaged under white supremacy. But do you guys think that somehow women are able to come to terms with it more easily than men? It seems that women are still kind of like black women specifically, are still kind of loyal to the black community, and because, the statistics say that black women aren't likely to date outside their race, although that's changing because all the propaganda that I noticed, and a lot of my black female friends notice that we're being encouraged to date, white men, just like Ms. Abram says. But at the same time, I'm wondering, Ms. Abram seems to have come to terms with white supremacy, and she's describing how her partner is kind of slower to that process. And so I'm just wondering, what is it about the system that makes women more apt to? It's a question, and I don't know, I'm just kind of pondering this whole kind of notion. I don't know if it makes any sense at all. Hello?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I don't know.
I can say, hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So what I can say is, to be honestly, he actually has been aware of it for a long time. He has several black male friends that are all very aware of it. One of them is very well read, and they've had a lot of these conversations. I actually asked him a question about his awareness of it probably a couple of months ago, and he said, "Oh, I know." I said, "Then why won't you do anything about it?" And he just said, "Nah." And what I took from that was that he's just so used to it. What's the point? And so, and for me, it feels like a newer understanding. I think because he's been subjected to it his whole life. He knows what it is. He knows what's happening. And he feels like that's just a part of his life and what he's going to have to go through. And I think what's been helpful about me being aware of it, and which adds to a better state of our relationship right now, is that I feel like I can kind of, since I understand it on that level, it's kind of pushing him to go, oh, maybe I should rethink some things and look at things a little differently, and try to probably be just more proactive. I feel like black women, in my eyes, are a lot less aware of it than black men are. I feel like black men are very aware of it from a very early age. They just kind of adapt to it more so than we do as black women. That's my opinion. That's what's your opinion.
Interesting. I don't know. I see so much confusion on the non-white team. It's like, truthfully, it's like going into a class and like everybody in the class has failed this course like for 5 consecutive years, 20 consecutive years, they failed this class, and going in and saying, well, I think this group over here is a little bit more informed than this group. And it's like, well, everybody here's got an F, and they've got an F for years. None of these people are very informed. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there is one group that is a little more informed, but I mean, it's not like I know any non-white people, excluding people who listen to this broadcast mostly. I can't really say that I know very many people at all who I could go to and say, hey, don't you think we should be suspicious of Tim Wise, male or female? And the response would be, heck yeah, be suspicious. I can't really think of very many people, male or female, that I could go to and say, you know, system of white supremacy, non-white people are conditioned to be combative with one another. You should really have a plan, a code for how you're going to deal with that and how you're going to make sure to avoid, minimize conflict with other non-white people. I mean, I just don't know very many people, so I don't know. Yeah, that would be my view. Non-white people are too confused for me to pick who's a little more or a little less confused.
Hey, Gus.
Yes, sir.
I can say that I agree with Che on that. I think, at least from my observations, I talk to a lot of people, and I think that's one of the most longing things is to see some more non-white females, if we can use the term conscious or just discussing racism, white supremacy. I see it with black males more often than black females.
Interesting. It's one to think on for folks listening in. Mr. Nero, I believe, is with us as well. Mr. Nero, if you're there and you have a question, feel free.
Greetings. Can I be heard?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. That's great. How is everyone doing?
Great.
I'm trying to minimize the background noise for Mr. Renegade.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. That's good. I missed some of the show. I did have a question. I understand you've that your perception has been altered in regards to Tim Wise.
Yes, it has.
Okay. And may I ask, do you remember exactly which show that you listened to really, drove that point for you? Or, I mean, was it one particular show, or was it by listening to several shows?
I only listened to probably the first three, and it was the second one.
The second
one was, yeah. It was pivotal to me.
Speakerphone is on. We're echoing.
Are we okay? Hello?
Okay, is that better?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It was pivotal to me because what I liked about it was Gus played Tim Wise back to himself. So it's actually probably would be if I actually recorded his entire speech and played it back to himself and then questioned him about everything he said in it. That was very pivotal to me, and I believe, and what was more important to me was really sealed it in was actually his response to Justice's questions, and how he was behaving towards it, and actually in having things pointed out to him that he continued to still do. So I'm pointing it out to you, laying the ground rule, and you continue to ignore the ground rule. That is what completely transformed my view of him. And I tried to be very neutral when I went in this year to listen to him at his session, and was very disappointed in him. I thought he would have altered it in some way to include the knowledge he has gained from being on the show so many times, and it didn't. It was the same exact thing as last year. So I found that very disappointing.
Interesting. Yeah, the reason why I ask is because Mr. Renegade has been criticized for doing so many shows with Mr. Wise, and so it's great to hear that that in doing those additional shows, that has brought someone some clarity. And I think that was one of the goals, was that hopefully someone would listen to the shows with Mr. Wise, and that, you know, that would augment their reality in regards to him being an anti-racist, and that he should be suspected along with any other white person.
I agree.
Guess I'll check with non-Mighty Wick. If you have any questions, your line is open, and then I'll go ahead and get everybody. So if folks have other questions, or if they want to, you know, ask or go back to something we discussed earlier. Non-Mighty Wick, do you have any questions? Oh, okay. He's good right now. Okay. Everybody that called in, your line is open. Just Jones, if you want to talk, if you could, your speakers are on, so it's echoing back in the phone just for the audio quality. If I guess if you're listening on a computer, headphones, that would work. If you could put headphones in, that would be great. And I hear myself echoing. Somebody's on speakerphone, I suspect. No speakerphone, please. It just adds distortion to the broadcast. Thank you.
Are you still waiting for questions?
Feel free. Anybody, it's open now. Everybody that called in, their line is open. So anybody that wants to ask a question or what have you, feel free. Hop right in.
Well, I'd like to know, Che, or Ms. Abrams, when you started having more discussions with your husband about racism, white supremacy, have you? Can you say that it has improved your relationship with him?
It has. It has. It's improved our relationship a lot. Just because I feel like I have an insight to him. I kind of feel like I have an unsaid insight. He really doesn't have to communicate to me some of the things he's been through, because now that I have this understanding, I can kind of just chime in with my thoughts and ideas. And I tie it all back to the system. So whenever I give him a suggestion about you should read this because, or I feel like you should look into this because, or you should consider this way, I always tie it back to the overall system, all areas of activity, so that he really understands that I'm trying to help him as a black man in this world, not just as my husband, but as a black man in this world. And I think for him, it really helps that I have that understanding that he doesn't feel like I'm just nagging him and harping on his manhood, that I really have an understanding of what his battle is to get to where he needs to go.
Okay, thanks.
Have any of the other listeners been to the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity? Am I the only one?
No, I had never heard of it, actually.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Abrams, at the NCOREr, did you see any crying from like non-white people, either or anybody actually?
You said crying?
Yeah.
Like tears?
Yeah.
Only when a few, sometimes, and usually it comes after people see a performance piece or a film. Usually that's when you have people with tears. It's usually a performance piece or tears, and a lot of the performance pieces, again, are kind of. I think I was listening to one of the shows, and Gus mentioned a documentary called Heading South. They're usually things like that you usually don't see in mainstream media that kind of pull out topics and things. Like one of the movies they actually showed was A Day Without a Mexican. And so sometimes people will go see them and they'll come out and they might be in tears because they didn't realize that impact was that way, or it was just such a moving moment or surreal moment that they just didn't have that understanding beforehand. But it's very far and few between. It really just depends on what you go and view at the conference.
Can you share a little bit about the? I'm hearing an echo. Can we not have the speakerphone on? If you're listening, if you're near a computer with the show playing, it's adding distortion. I shouldn't be echoing in the phone. Did you have any observations about the so-called homosexual or LGBTQ presence at the NCORE conference?
The biggest thing I noticed, I mean, there's people there, of course, and there are sessions on it. I don't go to any of those sessions. Usually, I don't go to specifically directed sessions about that because that will be the bundle for me that comes next later, a long time from now. What actually did happen on that topic was I had to go through an exercise in one of my sessions. I went to a session on bias, race incidents, basically documenting and having a policy and procedure for a school being aware of and being proactive about bias, race incidents on campus. So if something happens, what do we do? How is it documented? What comes out of it? And in that session, one of our first exercises actually was an LGBTQ exercise. It was called the STAR exercise, in which we wrote our name in the center of it, and then we wrote significant things on the 5 points of the star. And as we went through, depending on the color of your star, you have to tear off pieces, you have to fold back pieces, or you got to keep your whole star. And that was designed to kind of show you that when a person comes out as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, that when they come out that you either get to keep all of your support system. Some people will back away and come in later, and some people will completely disappear. That was a piece, and I always find at the conference that considering the rest of the presentation was all about race, it was mostly about race and ethnicity, I always find it interesting that it always finds its way in to that topic. So as soon as you start talking about black and white relations, all of a sudden, next thing you know, somebody brings up LGBTQ and other things like that. And it's not for me to say it's not important. It's just I find it interesting. Also, in my pre-conference session, which you can get continuing education credit for, so these are like day-and-a-half long sessions, I went to one on college men and engagement. The person who ran the session, his focus, his PhD work is on keeping black men in college and getting them graduated and keeping them engaged in that whole process. He has like 2 books on the topic. And but what I found interesting this time he expanded the topic to just be about men in general, which I found interesting because the whole purpose of the conference is to focus on really black men. And in that came up the issue of masculinity, what it is, what does it mean, who defines it. And I think one of the things that went back and forth was about this student who wears cornrows and baggy T-shirt and big jeans. And the presenter was saying he should be able to keep his identity because that helps him stay engaged on the campus. Someone else was saying he needs to become more professional because that unwritten kind of norm on campus is you kind of morph into what the campus community is. And it was interesting because as I'm sitting there, I'm watching the presenter who I believe, and I've not found it, I believe was a gay black male. And while he's saying this person should keep his identity, I'm like, you're in a suit and a button-up shirt and have this whole little persona you're trying to show us. And I found it just interesting, that whole conversation, because, again, it brings up what is masculinity and who decides that role and what that means, and that whole factor, and who guides them through that process. And that was a big topic on around the conference. But there are a lot of sessions on LGBTQ that come up for all the different groups, what it means, how to keep them in campus, give them the support they need, facilitate conversations, things like that. But, again, that's one of those areas where I feel like it's a bundle. I feel like that comes, you know, in my personal opinion, I feel like that's something that needs to come later. Right now, the whole reason why diversity exists is because you want to have more non-white people on campus. That's what we need to focus on, in my opinion.
I didn't want to cut anybody off. If you all have questions, I just wanted to check with Ms. Abram. Are you okay staying past 10 p.m. Pacific?
I am.
Oh, okay, groovy. I have one open line. If anybody would like to call in, you have 7 minutes. Feel free to dial. The number is 347-215-6071. One open line if you want to call in, questions, comments, all that good stuff. Feel free to call now, and yeah.
Is Justice still on the line?
I'm still here.
I
actually have another question. Okay. So in that conference, did they do a lot of talking about the system of racism and white supremacy?
No. That was my other. That was the other thing I noticed. There probably were I think, and I didn't go through the booklet in detail, but there probably may have been 2 or 3 sessions about white privilege, but that was it. But I didn't at any time see anything else that was about the system itself. The whole piece of it's in all areas of activity and these different things. And that's actually part of what frustrated me when I was going through the conference and going through my individual sessions. As I sit in on a session and we have that conversation about male masculinity and what does it look like, and I remember looking at the presenter's slideshow his PowerPoint that he had done, and his pictures themselves didn't even represent really what he was trying to say, and he didn't realize what he was portraying in his PowerPoint. So he had one PowerPoint was where are all the men on our college campuses, and there was a picture of a white man and with like curly fluffy hair, sweatshirt, sweatpants, like sitting slouched down at a desk amongst a bunch of white women, and that was the caption to kind of start us off for the session. And then he moved into it later, and he showed there's a school in Chicago for black men. And they have this dedication to their students that all of their black men are going to come in and they're going to graduate from college. So they're not just going to graduate high school, but graduate from college. Great idea. But the portrayal of them was they were all sitting at their desks, straight up, smiling, had their hair very neatly combed in these red ties, white shirts, and blue blazers and slacks. And as we're talking about this image of black men on our college campuses, and we're having that conversation about what does a professional black man look like, or what does a black man who's an educated black man look like, and all these things, I looked at his presentation, and in my mind I'm going, does anyone see what's wrong with those 2 pictures? Because clearly that caption is not talking about black men on college campuses. It is talking about where are all the white men on college campuses. And so I actually have to write the presenter and tell him that, but I had mentioned it to a couple of other people, and we didn't have time. They didn't have time to comment back on me, but I brought their attention to it. I was going, do you see that difference of what we have to look like to supposedly get to this status quo? And, when you're talking about most black men going into college campuses, you have them, they're coming usually from urban areas, and they have their own culture and identity, and you're basically completely getting rid of all of that, and you're making them very soft and very nice so that they can fit into this world, whereas the white kids don't have to do that at all. And so, that wasn't covered. So that was my example, one of the things that wasn't covered. And I kept thinking of all the areas of activity: economics, entertainment, education, law, politics, sex, religion, war. I'm thinking about all these activities, and I'm going to all these sessions, and I'm going, they are not talking about this. There is no session that says, this is a system of white supremacy, racism. It is in all these areas, and here are definitions to help guide you through the rest of this week, because it's 5 days of sessions, and at any given time period, there might be 40 sessions going on, and all these speakers and all these things, and it's just not addressed. So you're still constantly walking around confused, and so I went to another session and actually got into it with a black man from another campus because I was critiquing his work, his quote-unquote diversity work on his campus. And he got very upset with me that I was questioning the fact that they really weren't doing anything and he was perpetuating the system. I put it in much more softer terms for him, but when you are on a racist campus in over 20 years, it looks like you guys haven't done anything about it. And he got really upset with me about it. And I told him as a staff person looking in on that, I would have quit and sent to school. And he got really upset with me. So it was interesting to watch that. And that's when I then came back and I messaged Gus. And then today.
I just wanted to throw out the person that called in last 4 digits, 4503. Your line is open. If you have a question, 4503, your line is open if you have a question.
Hi, Gus. This is Jess Jones again. I'm just listening.
Oh, right on.
I got my computer. I called in through Skype, and so it was causing distortion, so I just thought I'd call.
Oh, groovy. Glad to have you on the line. Can I ask Mrs. Abram, how much does it cost to attend this 5-day affair, the NCORE conference?
The registration alone is probably about $700, and the hotel and everything can probably cost you another $2,000 or so, including meals and everything. It's probably another $2,000.
Whoa!
So it's not, and not including my flight. My flight over, because we were in D.C. this year. My flight to D.C. was about $600 some odd.
Whoa!
But it's pretty expensive for schools to send people out to the conference, which was one of my reasons for saying I want to do a session on definitions next year, so I can start that conversation. Because it's a lot of money to go and come back and go back to your campus, and you'll still be confused.
Just for the folks, the quick math on that, over $3,000 to attend a conference where they don't even give out definitions for a lot of the terms being used, and the admitted white supremacist known as Tim Wise gets to hang out and is not questioned with suspicion. Over $3,000. The white privilege conference, I don't think it's that expensive, but it's also pricey to go hang out at the white privilege conference also, where you don't get definitions about racism, white supremacy, white privilege. And keep that in mind for the folks who tune into this broadcast, where you can sit in the comfort of your home, you don't have to pay anything, and you can hear a lot of the people who've been to this conference for free.
Yeah, that's why I asked about the crying or whatever. I seen a video that Non-Mighty Wick did, and it had a non-white female, black female. She was very frustrated, and she was crying. And she was just saying that nobody answered her questions, and she was raising her hand, and nobody was acknowledging her, and she was just upset. So I could see, like, if you pay in, your money and you're not being, you're still confused, I could see how that could cause a lot of frustration. So I just was wondering the level of NCORE's, how many people really was feeling frustrated. frustrated and whatnot. So
I feel like it's indicative of academia. I know it's a conference, it's a professional conference, but I think I'm in an academic program now, and I feel it's really hard to critique white supremacy within the framework of white supremacy. So I think it's indicative of academia in general.
I would agree.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a literature class this year, and just someone brought up the term white supremacy, and there was audible gasps in the classroom, which isn't very conducive to really talking about the truth. And thus why I really enjoy your program. It's a real education. I should have saved all my money and just listen to the cow. So
I would agree with that too.
So, I have another question.
Go ahead.
There's an echo. What was, you probably answered this already, I'm not sure, but was the amount, was there a lot of non-white people there?
Yes. I didn't mention that earlier. The conference is probably about 85% or so non-white people.
85%. Okay.
Probably more like 90, but there's a lot of non-white people.
Okay. And did you get the impression too? I'm sorry. Does anybody else have any questions? Did you also get the impression that when they were talking about LGB or I can't get the acronym, but if anybody, if there was any white people that might have said that they were one of those terms, like, gay, lesbian, or whatever, did you get the impression that a white person that said that they were gay was not or did not have the ability to practice racism, white supremacy?
I did not have that experience at all. It's probably the sessions. I don't go. Probably the people who do those sessions probably would say something along those lines. But again, like I said, like 85% of the people, 85 to 90% of the people who attend the conference are non-white, and that includes the people who run the workshops. And it's not very common when I walk around it for people to have that conversation. Because what will come up is that amongst non-white people, you shouldn't say that because not all non-white people agree with the concept of LGBT. So it kind of just depends on the forum that you're in while you're there.
I see. The only reason why I said it is because from my own observations, it always appears to me that whenever a white person is presented as, whether they present themselves or someone else presents them as gay or, quote unquote gay or lesbian, that individual is seen as not being a racist. And I just wondered if that idea or concept was kind of being promoted there.
I haven't seen that at the conference personally, but I do have that experience at work. At work, I do definitely have that experience at work. That if they're LGBTQ, or whatever they want to call it, that they're not racist. They can't be racist because I'm going through the same struggle.
Okay.
So there was no slave owners that were gay.
That doesn't come up. That has not come up while I was there. It might have come up in some film presentations. There are a lot of films that they show, but it has. And any of the things I go to, no. But I'm sure there's probably other people who might be listening and haven't called in who might have gone to sessions and might be able to comment on that. But I haven't had that experience. Like a lot of what I hear on the show is all probably new information to me. In comparison to going to the conference, that's part of what this year I noticed as well. Is I hear all this wonderful information on the show, and I go to a whole conference on this for 5 days, from about 8 o'clock at night till about 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. It's like a straight 12-hour day, and these topics aren't discussed. This information isn't there. A lot of the maybe films and books and authors aren't presented there. So it's real interesting, and that was kind of my observation this year going in with my whole new set of classes, as I like to call them. I go in, and I was able to kind of analyze all of that to say, okay, well, next year I'll at least start with a session on definitions and hopefully expand it beyond that. Because I wanted to ask the people who organized the conference if they ever had Dr. Francis Cress Welsing come to campus or Neely Fuller Jr. come to campus, because it has been done over 23 years. And I don't know if they did that in the very early stages of the conference or not. But that's something I'm going to inquire into for next year, possibly 2012.
So let me get this straight. So you're saying that at the conference, people didn't learn as much as they could learn by listening to the cows.
Exactly.
And
what I learned at the cows is completely separate from what I learned at the conference.
And you have found the information that you have learned from the cows to be far more constructive than the information you got from the conference that you attended?
Yes.
Okay, so would you say the information then that Gus T Renegade and Justice are sharing on the cows to have more value than the information that you received at the conference?
Yes.
And how much was the conference again?
The conference was about a little over $3,000.
A little over $3,000 for the conference. That's just a great segue for me to plug the cows and how people should go to. Right, how people should go to the website, to the page on Blog Talk and hit that donate button and support the show. I just wanted to get that in real quick.
I agree. There were some people in some of the sessions that I went to, listening to them, it sounded like some people might have had codification, but I couldn't really pick them afterwards because we'd be rushing off to other sessions. So next year I'm hoping to figure out some kind of way to corral people to see if there's other people who listen to the show and can comment and help me bounce ideas back and forth, because it is, as I told Gus when I talked to him on Thursday, I just want to know if I'm crazy or not, because I can't rely on the people I go with because they don't listen to the show. I tell them to it. I sent them the link. They do not listen to the show. So I need another group to tell me if I'm crazy or if they're getting the same vibe when they go, and if they want to also help do some change and bring some different presenters in.
Yeah, Miss Abram, that's what I'm kind of fascinated and curious about with you. Like you said, some people can't listen to the show. The format is not something, it's not, glitz and glamour. It's just straight information and whatnot. And for you, seeing the relationship that black men, black women have, for you to change your behavior when you got the information, and I think, what do you think? Why did you think you were able to just adopt the information and accept? Change your behavior or your understanding. It seems like I don't know. It seems like you're pretty unique, but maybe not. But to me, what do you think it was that you were able to do what you were able to do?
Part of it was probably a lot of it has to do with my friend and her husband. They have a fabulous, they're black. They have a fabulous relationship. And they listen. They're the ones who turned me on to the show. And what's helpful having those two, because they're probably the only two where I can really have this conversation with them about it. And what really helped is their understanding of it, and then a lot of the people on the show have taught in different places in higher education, have all these books that are these wonderful resources. I have a long-running list right now. And also what comes from the show is the ability to listen to how people, or at least how Gus questions white people, which has been very helpful for me, and especially at work. Listening to how he questions and picks things out, the need for definitions, that whole process, that's really helped me modify my behavior. And then inherent, and it also kind of, for me, sets in this place of I kind of knew what's been going on, had an idea about it for a long time, and just kind of didn't know where to place it all. And finally, I feel like I have a place where, it's like my dose of coffee on a regular basis. I was telling my mother when I flew back in today, I asked her, guess how much television I've watched this week? And she said, probably none, because you've been listening to your show. And I said, exactly. I've been catching up on my show all week. And when I fly, that's all I listen to when I fly. Because for me, it helps me get through everything that's happening. So I've found it very constructive. I think I told Gus on Thursday, and I mentioned it on the show, I was very close to quitting my job on several occasions, just out of the pure level of frustration and all kinds of things. And once I kind of got into this, I went, oh, it all makes sense now. And so I usually tell people at work, if you see me giggling, it's not because the topic is funny, it's because I understand the system that's happening, and then I'll stop, because then the part that's sad is I look at people across the table and go, and you're just confused, and I can't have this conversation with you, because when I do, you shut me down. So the show is great, and and that's why part of the reason why I'm on it today is because I was like, we need this at my conference, because I think all the people, I just sat in the conference the whole time going, y'all so confused. I was like, I'm still confused, but not this confused. Like, it was a whole different space. It was just fascinating to me and sad.
But what you said is that your friends were, as an example, they have a good relationship, and something that they were doing was listening to the cows.
Yes, they were listening to the cows. And for a long time, I met them when I was probably a sophomore in college, so it's been well over 10 years that we've been friends, and they've always had this view, and I think for them, the show just solidifies it for them, and for me, it's kind of they've walked me through little bits, and now we all can just have this full-fledged conversation. We have the longest hours of conversation when we sit together and just plan things out and practice things and share information. And then there's another book I add to my list in this whole constant flow that we have. And we try to have a conversation with other people. Like my mom is very receptive to it because she's actually working on her dissertation, and it's along these lines. She actually told me about Dr. Joy DeGruy a long time ago. And I said, oh, you need to add these books to your list, Mommy. And so, I have my mom and the two of them, and kind of my brother, because he was in the Nation of Islam, so my brother kind of gets it. And now I have my husband. I'm like, oh, I didn't know you knew all this, so we can talk. But it's this very small network of people, and at least when I listen to the cows and I listen to a lot of the listeners and the callers, I feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. This really is, in fact, happening, and it's happening all over the world. And it kind of just gives you a way to kind of move about life and not get worry and not have that stress. I've heard many of the speakers talk about the stress that we have as non-white people, especially in this country, but non-white people, and it kind of relieves a lot of that. So I'm actually much happier now since I understand it. Answer your question.
Yeah, I think that's great. Like a great testimonial or whatever. Just being a female, you know, especially me, as being somebody that never thought that females would understand, you know. So yeah, hearing you is cool. It's pretty cool.
Inspiring.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, you just reminded me of, it's funny because since I started listening to the show, I've actually end up, because I'm one of the few black people in my office, so I actually end up with a lot of black students coming to visit me, but I've had way more black men coming into my office lately than not, and we literally sit in my office for 2 hours, and we start off on task and end up on the cows. and they are like, wow. One, I've shared some information with them, but two, a lot of them have some really great information to share back. But they also feel like I have this understanding of them that no one else can understand. And so they feel like they're in a very safe space when they come into my office. And I feel very rewarded to have that bond with them. Because it's hard, especially coming into college or university where there aren't too many of you, and especially on our campus, there aren't very many black men, and definitely aren't very many black men in higher positions. So it's nice that we can come in and they can have that conversation with me. And they email me about all kinds of stuff and can I come back and visit and different things. And they're very receptive to it, which I have found also very interesting.
I feel like I got a nice little commercial for the cows. Did anybody, I'm just being really crude and switching the subject, did anybody see the Boondocks episode tonight?
Oh,
yeah. It doesn't come until on the East Coast, huh? You've probably seen it already.
Yeah, it was people, the East Coast folks, East Coast and Central at this point, it's already aired there. So I don't know if you got anybody on the line who's East Coast or Central, but you know, I was just curious. If I wasn't on the show, I would have seen it already. I would have watched it online.
I agree.
Oh, okay.
Mine is on TV, so I would have watched it too. I forgot about that when we were planning.
If I had known, I hadn't looked at the schedule, so I didn't know which episode was coming on, what it was going to be about. If I had known, I would have probably pitched that to see if we could have made this like an hour later, hour and a half later, to have watched that episode. Because man, but it's good. That's another show. That'll be next week, white people permitting. That'll be another show, and we can put this week with next week, and we can talk about all the gayness in the Boondocks in one show next week. So that'll be something to look forward to.
Yeah, from your description, I was thinking instead of the title being paused, it should have been stop.
It's relevant. The title is relevant. The title, they named it Pause because we talked about that on the last show when we talked about the Boondocks. There, the running joke, right? If you say something that sounds so-called gay, you got to say no homo. That's the title for what they call that is Pause. No homo. They have I guess a label for what you do in that moment. Whenever you say what you say, and then you're supposed to say no homo, they just call that a pause moment. So that's why they named it Pause. This episode tonight.
Wow.
So is it appropriate to ask whether Aaron Magruder is a homosexual?
Yes, I think that's very important.
I don't think
if he ever comes on the cows, that question will be asked.
Does anyone know? I mean, I guess.
I don't know.
I don't know.
unless there's a Dave Chappelle type of thing going on where some other people are trying to change the show into something he didn't want. But I was wondering the same thing as Gus was describing the synopsis of the last couple of shows. Because to not even have a heterosexual couple on the show? Or any regularly occurring females?
And a man with a checkbook is saying, nope.
Yes.
Can't have that because I'm not paying for it.
Very possible.
Somebody, I would give them, I try to give credit if a listener pitches a guest or if they share some, constructive information that I share on the show. I try to make sure I give them credit. I don't remember who the person was, so I'll maybe find it between, one of the next couple shows. But they said to watch season 1, but to watch with the audio commentary for season 1 with Uncle Ruckus, because he does 2 episodes where he talks over the episode and gives you his opinion, which is interesting. I'd ring the cowbell, given what 818 shared. But one of the other episodes I listened to, they had the commentary. You see all of the black people, right, who work on the Boondocks. So Ann Magruder is there and all the other folks who do voices. Regina King was not there, but the rest of the folks are there. One white person, she's there, and she's, I think, the voice director and the casting director, right? She has a lot of authority amongst all these Negroes. And they were talking, making jokes, being goofy, and at one point during the commentary, one of the black males, he said, we got to have the white woman here. She keeps us in charge. We got to have a white person to make sure that the niggas act right. This is like Sigourney Weaver in Gorillas in the Mist. And I was just like, what did he just say? And I was just like, man, oh man, this is really, really sad. The continued self-referencing as apes and gorillas. Get Boondocks season 1. On the audio commentary. I think it's the first episode from season 1, but it's on the audio commentary. But one of the black males says that. I don't remember which character it is, but he says that. Like Gorillas in the Mist, we need the white woman here to keep these niggas in check. Ha 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 ha.
Victims.
Miss Abrams.
Yes.
Mrs. Abrams. I'm sorry, Mrs. Abrams. I was going to ask a question last episode, but I think I'll ask you. As far as being codified, I was thinking when I was hearing Q.W.'s stories about his tragic situation with the white female, and the other story he told about the female trying to get food to the Hurricane Katrina victims. Do you think it's important to and plus the guest that Gus is going to have that documented all of this police racism and whatnot? How important do you think it is to document what you're doing? Because, you can get in a situation where it's their word against yours, but if you have some type of documentation, do you think that that's important?
I do believe documentation is very important. Have any of you heard of microaggression? It's more in the psychology world. It's kind of like the here in California, we always say we get a lot of microaggressions, non-blatant racist acts against you, kind of thing, and they're just really hard to kind of pick out. At least that's my view of what happens. And so there's a psychological word called microaggressions, and there's basically, it's the behaviors that they do to you when they cut you off, are real short and dry with you. And Gus has a whole other list on his blog. And I feel like in that instance, that's part of why I went in task with when I went to the conference, was I wanted to figure out how to start documenting those things so that, you know, one, I know I'm not crazy, and two, if something comes down the line, I have a proof of it and what it is. It's hugely important. I just saw, you know, one of our faculty contract wasn't renewed this year, and while people say, well, it was for these reasons, which were, you know, legal reasons, reality was, you know, at some point he spoke up. I mean, my opinion is at some point he spoke up, and they found a legal way to get him out. I think I was listening to Dr. Baruti's show on my way into California today, and he had mentioned something along those lines. They make things so uncomfortable for non-white people that you either quit or you get fired. So I think it's very important to document and have a good understanding. Microaggressions is part of my definitions for next year. But to document those little bitty kind of non-blatant racist behaviors that you see and that you have happen to you, so that way when it comes down to it, you have a case for things. And I always, in my documentation that I have at work, I usually, and this is just my personal stuff because I have a staff, but I always do dates, times, locations. I keep all the facts, take all the emotion out, and initials. I use just initials of the people who were present to document. And so far, that process has worked in my favor and my favor.
What you're just talking about kind of reminds me of I can't remember what the name of the show was, Gus, but you had a show where you talked to a non-white female in the UK who used the countering racism in the workplace suggestion from counterracism.com. And that's what she did when she was experiencing experiences she was going through. She documented a lot of situations that were going on and was able to use that in addition to some other recommendations to counter the racism in the workplace.
Dark Matter. Yeah, that was back in February. She was also on Cree's program, but yeah, she excellent. I guess, folks, if you're not familiar, you can go back and listen to either of those programs, or you can go to counter-racism.com and go to the work study page and check out the countering racism in the workplace, and you'll see long posts. But yeah, exactly what Dr. Muhammad just talked about: documentation of suspected racist behavior or just incorrect things. You just want to be keeping an eye and being observant of things that white people are doing on the job.
Incorrect or correct, because they document everything.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And
thank you.
You can go into a courthouse and pull out records from 100 years ago. You're in the right place. They document everything. Oh.
Yeah, I think that non-white people should definitely, even if you don't win, for your own personal state of mind and peace of mind, to know you're not crazy, because white people have you thinking, well, maybe I did leave it there a week, and you'll really start questioning, like, well, maybe that stuff was there a week long. I mean, I guess I'm just, crazy. I stressed out. I thought it was just a day or so, but you said it was a week. Maybe it is a week. Maybe it was a week. So.
White people are really good at that. Being able to skillfully use words to make you doubt your own judgment and intelligence. They are superb at that. I don't feel like I'm just making commercials for the show, but when Dana R. Carney was here, man, it's easy for white people to do that in the system of white supremacy. It's easy for them to lie to non-white people and to be deceptive with words. It's just set up for that to be a piece of cake. for them, encountering racism, white supremacy. One of the things I say all the time, just being confident. I would say that more than anything else was the thing that motivated me, inspired me, whatever word you want to use, to attempt to work against racism, white supremacy, being more confident in my understanding of what was happening on the planet, racism, white supremacy.
Hey, Gus, what you just said on the use of words, I just got one brief example. I remember when I was in college, I had 3 white persons for roommates, 3 white males, and almost every day when I'd be there, they would call me a suit. And at the time, I was like, what is a, I never asked them, but I would say, what is a suit? And sometimes they'd make a comment and say, oh, you're worse than a whole pack of suits, or he's worse than a whole pack of suits. And not like 15 years later, I see a reference in the news where one of those princes in the UK called a non-white person that was supposed to be their friend a suit. And they were saying it was a derogatory term, kind of like nigger. But this whole time that I was with these guys, I mean, sometimes when they called me that, I even laughed with them, like it was a joke, and I just didn't realize. You know what I'm saying? It's an example of a word that they were referring to me in a derogatory way, and I just didn't know it. And they were all the while I was the joke. They were getting it between themselves. Something you said about their use of words made me think about that. So,
excellent illustration. Thank you for sharing. And that happens a lot. I've heard tons of stories like that where white people were practicing racism. We talked about that earlier. Practicing racism around you, and you don't even know it. You're being mistreated, and you're not even aware of it. That happens all the time. I've been a victim of that myself. Probably still am.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Non-Mighty Wick, I think he's with us. I don't know if you had any comments on what you heard, if it's relevant to what you observed at the White Privilege Conference.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat that?
I said I don't know what Mrs. Abram, what she shared about the NCORE conference. I don't know if any of it is relevant to what you observed at the White Privilege Conference, if any of it sounds familiar, the confusion, the jumble, any of it, I don't know.
Yeah, it seems to be what to expect at these type of events when the onset people aren't using definitions. I mean, when you're dealing with so many different people in one room or in one place, and words are being exchanged, people are just assuming that they understand what everybody else is talking about if no one is giving definitions for what's going on, or if no one is requesting them. And so, yeah, it seems to be the case.
Yeah, not Mighty Wick. I watched that video, and I was kind of trying to tell you to go over and talk to that girl, but it was a video, it was the past, but I was just saying, go talk to her, because she was she was crying and whatnot. I was trying to get you to go talk to her, but yeah, that was crazy. But I would have.
I understand that feeling. It's like when you see a non-white person who has been mistreated because of racism, white supremacy, it does put that feeling, I know at least in me, of wanting to do something to try to correct that situation. But it's almost like just that conference alone really helped solidify for me that as long as white supremacy is going on, it's like it's almost so impotent to be able to do the things that you would think naturally a man should be able to do, which is protect, support, and defend those who need it. And the White Privilege Conference, I saw numerous. I mean, on the scale was large of non-white people, either just being in a state of confusion because of the white people around and not really seeing a solid way to always go about bringing clarity to those situations.
Do you think it was to the point to where some people were might have walked away from the conference so frustrated that they just said that they might would say come to the conclusion that there's no use in trying to fight against racism?
Yes, sir. I mean, if you speaking about almost like a decrease in hope or a decrease in what you would see as the likelihood that the system could be eliminated, then I would say that that effect or that feeling could be produced at a conference like the one I attended.
I think we discussed that at the conference. I think when I didn't see Shakti Butler's presentation, and she is a victim of white supremacy, but I think Non-Mighty Wick was left feeling that unless there's an act of divine intervention, a flood, a meteor hitting the planet, that this might not be a fixable problem.
Yes, sir. I mean, it was like I had to really analyze my level of respect for the confusion in another person, in a victim. I had to really recognize that that's not anything to be taken lightly.
Confusion is lethal. I think that was the mantra for the week. Confusion is lethal.
Right, definitely is. As long as you're confused. I mean, all of us are confused, I mean, in my opinion, but you got different levels. But that confusion definitely helps you cooperate with the system. Every time you're unconfused and you're attempting to establish a resistance, but you're aware of it. But confusion is the enemy, sir.
Ms. Abram, I wanted to ask you about the fact that you seem to have some understanding of your husband and of males. Me reading neuroscience and studies on the brain and how men and women, how their brains are actually different. I'm actually fascinated by. I'm fascinated by black people, non-white people. Like I don't know if that's a good thing because they are people, but I just look at them as like these brains and these different levels of conditioning. Would you like your husband to understand yourself? I mean, what makes you a female? Is that something that you would want?
It is something I would want because I think it's helpful when both parties understand each other, how we work, how we think, that whole process. I'm pretty vocal with him on more things now than before. So he kind of is getting that understanding of how I work and how my days go, and what was frustrating at work. And there's, I think for me now that I kind of have more of the terms and ways to relate it to certain things, our understanding of each other's daily stresses or whatever happens is probably a lot easier versus me just saying, like, what you've been doing all day, nothing, blah. There's kind of a little bit more into it to where I can kind of delve into his day and he can delve into mine, like what happened at work, what made you frustrated, how did that conversation with this person go, what did you do to make that conversation go in your direction. We kind of have those conversations now. But there's a lot of work still to do because this is, even though we've been together for a while, this is all a new level for us in terms of understanding male and female. I think what's been most helpful is we're starting to really understand our roles more so. Individually, he as a black man, me as a black woman, and making that work together, especially since we have our son and my stepdaughter. Because they're both 4 and they'll grow, and we want to make sure they have that modeling in their life that they're okay and they have that confidence in each other. They're very strong people right now, and we want to kind of keep them that way. So it's been helpful.
Yeah, I think that's great. I just think that's great. What you're saying is excellent. I mean, to be able to have a context for your spouse, you know what I'm saying? Not making assumptions and whatnot. That's incredible, actually.
Yeah, and that was something, and like the assumptions thing, that's a huge piece of a relationship. You just kind of, they're not doing this, you assume this, or I'll be at work and he assumes that, you assume, at its simplest form, you assume I'm sitting at my desk all day. And I'm not just coming home being, in this mood for no reason. It's like, now it's the conversation of what happened. Talk to me about it, because you seem a little upset about something. And he knows when I say it's the system, he knows exactly what I mean and what I'm talking about. And that's all I need to say now. Before I used to have these elaborate stories that went on and on forever, and now I can just go, it's the system, and I'll just walk away. Or today, like I kept walking past people, and he didn't get it until I broke down the acronym, but I was like, oh, that's just sad. They're just confused. And he got it. He was like, okay, I see what you're saying. And every blue moon he go, well, explain to me why. And that was a nice piece that we had going. We never had that bond being out and about. It was a completely different realm of conversation beforehand. So we actually want to hang out with each other. Wait, we have a codified conversation?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Sounds like,
we do.
Hey, that's good. That's where I want to be.
I didn't even think of it as that, but we do have a codified conversation, and it's and a lot of that is what's been helpful is I get to watch my friend and her husband use it, and he and I we just have those conversations. He's been a big help to me understanding black men as well, and and the whole don't give up piece on us. He's a huge help in that because he's always been my male point of view for like the last 10 plus years, but it's been more helpful in this scenario. It really meant a lot for him to say, don't give up on him. You got to have our back, because if we don't have you, ain't nobody got us. And I didn't get it until I really started getting into the work. I really didn't understand what he said. And now I'm totally like, no wonder why. And so now my fight, like I said before, is just for him as a black man. I'm fighting for black men and black women. That's my fight. As individuals. And I'm not trying to say y'all need to go date each other in the whole piece. I'm saying as individuals, we have to be happy with us to move forward in life. It's very cliche, but it's the truth. And especially when you're black, you got to be happy with everything you are. So.
Ma'am, that is a monumental task, not giving up on black males.
It's hard.
I mean, black males have, lately I've been seeing us stoop to such, all new levels. I mean, we so low, you got to build a fence to keep the ants from pissing on us. I mean, that's the levels we have. I have had guys, I drive cab, and I have had people in my cab that we're getting worse. I'm just going to leave it at that. Black males are getting worse. They're not getting better, they're getting worse.
That's why we're going to need more of us attempting to take the duty or put it upon ourselves to put a lot of constructive suggestions out there to try to curb some of it. All of it, would be the ultimate objective. What does SADD mean? I heard you say it's sad, but what does that mean?
Gus there? Gus?
Oh, I'm here. I'm here, but I haven't been using the term. So whoever's been using the term, that's the codified.
Oh, I've been using it. I'm
there
sorry. I had notes somewhere. I made notes. But I remember one was space, like a space for white people. Oh, let's see. Let me see if I can summarize it. I had notes somewhere, and I forgot where my notes were. I take cryptic notes everywhere. Essentially, when I see sad, I call them buffer people. Gus uses the term sad. I use the term buffer people. People who kind of who are blocked by their relationship and wanting to be in a relationship and need to be in a relationship with white people. That's how I see the term sad. That is, you're gonna constantly stick up for them for what they say, what they do, how they behave. That you kind of don't have this, that you can't fathom that this person who's so close to you could be racist. That whole piece. So when I walk around and I say sad, that's essentially in my mind what comes up. But I also term them as buffer people.
I see.
In between
me and
the white.
Oh, go ahead. In between what?
Oh, I said in between me and the white people. That's the person who stands between me and the white people. I think Dr. Baruti called them like the Negroes. I think everyone kind of has a little different term, but that's how I see it.
Okay. The first time I saw it on your blog, Gus, and I didn't know what it meant. I saw the SADD, and I said, I got to find out what that means. And so, Ms. Abrams, do you know what the acronym means, or you can't find what you wrote down?
I can't find what I wrote down because I wrote it off of Gus's blog. Because then I went running behind telling my mom she needed to look at it.
Okay, I'll just have to go back and read it myself. I just glanced and I saw it on there. I didn't get a chance to read the details.
Yeah, it's very detailed.
Is it okay if I go ahead? Because I have it written down too.
Please do.
The S is for space for non-racist white people. A is for abstract, meaning racism becomes abstract. The D is for defending white people, and the other D is for divided loyalties.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's good.
Not from the website, though.
Okay. Where did that term come from? Who created it?
Did it come from the White Privilege Conference after you left that? I have not listened to all the shows, so I could be wrong.
I think I first began using it in January. I think that was the first time I started using it, and with that explanation and using it as an acronym in that manner in January and breaking it down that way in January. I didn't do the blog post until recently. The blog post I don't think got done until April or May, but I had been using it and explaining it in that manner since January of this year, I believe.
Well, goes to show you how out of it I've been, and I'm going to go and read the blog.
Racism-notes.blogspot.com, racism-notes.blogspot.com. It should be the first post on the page. And recently substituted and added Dr. Nell Irvin Painter as one of the illustrations.
And while you're there, don't forget to hit the donate button and donate to the cow.
Donate button.
That's right.
Mrs. Abrams, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Have you noticed the symptoms of sadness with your own mother?
I have. Probably more so, I would say, the divided loyalties piece. Probably since you started reading Neely Fuller Jr., she's not as bad, but yeah, I've seen it with her. It's not so bad, but I've definitely seen it with her. And we have that, and it's not. And the nice part about it is she's very open to the conversation about us talking about what do you think of the concepts compared to your relationship.
Okay. So it doesn't seem to anger her or make her defensive?
Not at all. Actually, it does not make her angry or defensive in terms of like asking her about it and is she trying to defend them. She actually isn't. She actually has a much better understanding of him and why he does what he does, says what he says, and behaves the way he does. For her, it's like it's not to say she's been frustrated about it for years. It's kind of like now she has terms to put with everything, and to an extent she got a little angry. When I asked her about it, she said she got a little angry and frustrated and was like, I need a break from you for a little bit. So I think for her it's kind of opening her eyes, I would say. I do not know if she's had any conversations with him. That's something I have to ask her.
Okay.
But I have other people who, like I have a friend who's half white, and her mother is white, and she and her mother are very close, and she was married to white men and things, and the SAD acronym applies to her in all aspects.
Yeah, I noticed that with most of the black females that I've had any interaction in where you bring up the subject, or even if you don't criticize them, just if they find out that you don't support those type of relationships, it's like an all-out attack. Like I actually left someone a compliment on their animal or something. They had a cute dog on a video. She's married to a white man, never mentioned her husband, never mentioned anything about that. But she saw a comment that I had left basically saying I didn't support that, nothing directed toward her, and she just kept leaving all these like silly comments attacking me and, oh, you wish you had my husband, I'll give him a kiss for you. And I'm like, you're on one. I don't want to kiss your husband. Like, I don't even know what he looks like. Like, can't you take a compliment and just run with it? But like really, defensive at first, but then she turned like offense on me and I never attacked her. But, just to know somebody was not in support of that, it brought out like the super defensive stance that she had to take for like all white men and her husband included, though he was never mentioned by me. So it's refreshing to know that there's actually at least one black female that can see the information and hear it and, think about it critically and analyze it and, and really apply it into how she's looking at her own life. That's very refreshing to hear.
Yes. That's what I actually found that interesting myself, and I probe her probably like once a week about it. Because she also has a program, a nonprofit for women with alcohol recovery and things like that, and she has a lot of white women, Latin American women, black women in her program. And one of her biggest frustrations with her program, and part of the reason why I bought her the book, is because the black women always try to basically do her program under, and they'll call and do all kind of crazy reports on her, and then the state has to come in and all this crazy stuff. And she's saying it always happens when there's two black women in this house together. And I just told her, I said, you just need to read the book. I'm not going to give you my opinion of it. I said, because I'm still learning, but I'm just going to give you the book, and you'll probably figure it out by the time you're done with the book. And so and I think that's a lot why she's very open to it, because she's in a state of constant learning, and wants to figure out how, what, and why, and part of it is also her dissertation. So she has to learn it and apply it, but it'll be interesting in the months to come to see how her opinion forms specifically about her relationship with her husband.
We got about 90 seconds remaining in the program. We'll be back 9 hours. We'll be back. Graham Raymond, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, writer for the Village Voice and the misconduct of enforcement officials, New York Police Department. I've talked enough today. I'm good. Anybody, you all can have the last, I guess we got 70 seconds.
Thank you, everyone.
Mrs. Abram, thank you very much for coming on the cows.
Yes, you were a bona fide guest.
Thank you.
I learned a lot.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Refreshing to have a female on the show as well, if I must say so myself.
Thank you.
Another one.
I really enjoyed this show.
Have to do it again. Have to have you as a guest again. Very constructive, I think. Thank you all the callers. And 818 also. She beat a lot of folks to the punch. She invested in the cows way before. So thank you 818 for supporting as well. I think that's it. Oh, I was going to read you all. April listener, she sent me an email, but I don't think I'll have time. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll clean up and add stuff that people sent me that was constructive tomorrow. 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back soon. Replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible.